In this episode, we explore S.P.A.M, the infamous tinned meat of World War II fame and its competitors. We'll bust a myth, maybe, and try some recipes while examining the contributions this meat made to the military and the home front. Welcome to The Victory Kitchen, the podcast all about American food rationing during World War II. I'm your host, Sarah Creviston Lee, author, historian, and vintage foodie. I'll be exploring the logistics of food rationing, featuring wartime cookbooks and recipes, and highlighting real home front experiences. We're going to be learning exactly what our grandmothers had to do to get their food to fight for victory. Hello, welcome to another episode of the Victory Kitchen podcast. Oh my goodness, it's been a while. And that's mostly to blame on being in grad school, so I appreciate your patience. I've actually had this episode kind of written, researched, all that for a while, but there was just a few little things I wanted to check on, and homework got in the way and all that. So I decided to just go for it. So here we go. I mean, this episode might not be everything I wanted it to be, but I tried my best. So let's get into this. This is a very popular topic when it comes to wartime. I think maybe one of the most famous topics surrounding food in wartime, S.P.A.M. I mean, you either love it or you hate it. Now, as I was doing research for this episode, I have to give a huge amount of credit to Carolyn Wyman. She wrote the book S.P.A.M, A Biography, The Amazing True Story of America's Miracle Meat. And this is a fantastic history book. It's the only history book that I'm aware of. So it gives you so much more than just a simple internet search can give you. So I really highly recommend this book if you are a S.P.A.M fan. And so in the course of my research in her book and also online, I came across some very interesting acronyms for what people thought S.P.A.M stood for. And some of these come from soldiers in World War II. But here is the list of what I found. S.P.A.M, S.P.A.M, stands for shoulder of pork and ham. Salt preserves any meat. Salty piece of meat. Quote unquote spoiled ham. Spare parts and meat. And that's the one that I grew up hearing. That's actually, I thought that's what it meant. Next is stuff posing as meat, scientifically processed animal matter, and then my favorite, sizzle, pork, and Well, before we get into S.P.A.M itself, I wanted to do something that maybe is a little bit more unique when people, talk about S.P.A.M. There's a lot of coverage of S.P.A.M on blogs and probably YouTube and everywhere. And so I actually was kind of daunted and reluctant to do an episode on S.P.A.M just because there's been so much done about it already. So in order to make this a little bit different, I wanted to focus on S.P.A.M's competitors because, you maybe have heard of a couple of them, but there's quite a few more that maybe you haven't heard of. And I think this is interesting because S.P.A.M just, wasn't the only one in the grocery store that people had as a selection when they were looking for their tinned meat. So first we're going to look at MOR, M-O-R. This is from the Wilson's Company. And a little history of the company. The company's name changed to Wilson & Co. Its headquarters moved to Chicago's Union Stockyard, and it joined Armour and Swift at the top of the American meat industry. In 1917, when it had already established a sporting goods subsidiary, Wilson ranked as one of the 50 largest industrial corporations in the country. By the mid-1930s, the company employed about 3,900 men and 1,000 women at its plant on Chicago's South Side. And at the end of World War II, Wilson's annual sales neared $440 million. And so I think when it comes to like wartime advertisements, I've seen a few the most. MOR is one of them. I also found one called Biff, which was also from Wilson's. But wasn't able to find out any more about it. Some of these are very obscure. Next is Treat, Treet. I have seen ads for this as well in 1940s magazines and newspapers. This was from Armour's Armour Star Treat. It is a canned lunch meat product similar to Spam, first introduced in 1939 by Armour & Company in the United States. Sold as, quote, spiced luncheon loaf, unquote. It is made with chicken and pork and has a more finely ground texture than Spam, more akin to bologna or Vienna sausages. Like Spam, it is often fried or baked before consumption. Treat is currently manufactured by Pinnacle Foods. So I think this is interesting distinction that Treat had a more finely ground texture. Spam's texture is very distinct. And so I think I would like to try this. In fact, I think I did find a can of this. Is it Treat or More that I found? I did find a can of the competitor. Then there was S.P.A.M, another one that I have seen ads for in wartime magazines. This was produced by Swift & Co. So between 1887 and 1892, new packing plants were opened in Kansas City, Omaha, and St. Louis. By the time the founder died in 1903, his company grossed $200 million in annual sales and employed about 23,000 people across the country, including over 5,000 workers at its slaughtering plant in Chicago's Union Stock Yard. So Chicago was a place where there was a lot of slaughtering plants. So Wilson's was one, Swift & Co. another. In 1908, Swift plants across the country slaughtered a total of about 8 million animals. By this time, Swift owned a fleet of nearly 5,000 refrigerated rail cars. Annual sales reached 700 million by the late 1920s, when the total workforce of the company, which ranked as one of the largest industrial corporations in the United States, consisted of about 55,000 people. Swift stopped slaughtering in Chicago in 1953, but its corporate headquarters remained in the city. I found this information from the Encyclopedia of Chicago. So this was a big company, and it was a popular luncheon meat. And I think we have to remember that that's the category of these tinned meats. They're called luncheon meat, or sometimes they're referred to as spiced ham, just kind of generically. So if a recipe from wartime calls for spiced ham, more than likely it means one of these tinned meats. I guess you can just choose the one that's easiest to find. And I found in the newspaper, there are many grocery store ads where they say the product and then how much they cost. And I found this very interesting image. I'll post it in my Substack post. Armour's potted meat was 23 cents for a 3.5 ounce tin, and it was 1 ration point. Then S.P.A.M luncheon meat for a 12 ounce can was 35 cents and 5 ration points. S.P.A.M luncheon meat was a 12 ounce can for 33 cents, and it was 5 ration points. And then there was a luncheon meat Swift's corned mutton, 29 cents for a 12 ounce can, 5 ration points. And then Brunch brand luncheon meat, 35 cents for 5 ration points. And then luncheon meat tongue. I don't know if that's a brand name or that's describing what's in the can. I don't know. 12 ounce can for 49 cents. Wow, that's more expensive than all the others. And 5 ration points. So it looks like the Armour's potted meat, which is a little bit different than luncheon meat, that's cheaper, and especially cheaper with ration points. So 5 ration points for just 1 tin. Now, there were a few other brands that were very difficult to find anything on. One was called Tang. Another one was Moon Rose, which I actually really love the name of that. I've seen pictures of the product, but I can't find anything online about it. Dubuque, Nationwide, and then, of course, S.P.A.M, which was produced by Hormel. Is that how you say it? Hormel? I think it's Hormel. before we get to Spam, we have to talk about the role of luncheon meat on the home front. This is pretty important. Spam and other luncheon meats were marketed to folks on the home front as a convenient, inexpensive meat with ads illustrating different ways to prepare it. So lots of recipes out there. S.P.A.M, produced by Swift. There's a S.P.A.M ad from In the Life magazine, January 25th, 1943. It says, S.P.A.M, in a 2-minute sandwich he'll ask for again and again. And in this ad, it shows a man in overalls with these safety goggles kind of put up on his forehead. He's opening up his sandwich, which has 2 slices of S.P.A.M on some greens, and he's smiling. And then it has this picture, a very colorful picture of 2 fat slices of S.P.A.M on a sandwich with lettuce, it looks like, and beans, baked beans. And I think there's some, I'm not sure, is this butter or I don't know. It's something yellow that they're spreading on the bread. Yeah, interesting. It says, working at wartime speed, he needs in his lunch pail the zest of good eating, food to lift his spirits, food that's savory, hot, or cold. And that's S.P.A.M. Made of tender, lean meat, S.P.A.M provides substantial nourishment, muscle-building protein, food energy, essential vitamins of the B complex. Made by Swift, S.P.A.M has the exclusive Swift's Premium Sugar Cure, a rich and savory flavor unaltered by spices or heavy seasonings. Of special importance during these Share the Meat days is the fact that S.P.A.M is all meat, no waste. A big help towards stretching your share. Another reason for putting a S.P.A.M and bean sandwich in his lunch pail tomorrow. And then it provides the recipe. To a 1/2 cup drained baked beans, add 1 tablespoon ketchup, a 1/4 teaspoon grated onion. Butter the bread, so it was butter. Put in lettuce, the beans, and 2 slices of S.P.A.M. Flavor-wise, I can see how this would be appealing, but like the mechanics of eating a sandwich like that would be a nightmare. I think you'd have to just mash up the baked beans so they'd stick together. Otherwise, they'd be like falling all over the place. Still, an interesting idea. There's also an ad from Moon Roast, spiced luncheon meat from the Daily Ardmorite. Did I say that correctly? It's from Oklahoma. 27th July, 1944. It says, a satisfying lunch for a hot day. A generous slice of Moon Rose luncheon meat with lettuce and mayonnaise on fresh bread, backed up with olives and a glass of cold milk. And then here's another recipe within that ad. It says, and try this. Remove meat from the can, cover with brown sugar, stick in a few cloves, and heat slowly in a low oven. A meat course, inexpensive and easily prepared. I mean, if you're imagining this, it really is like the Thanksgiving ham with cloves stuck in it, but miniaturized. It's kind of funny to see because it's just this rectangular cube of meat stuck all over with cloves. But, you know, if we think about people who had smaller kitchens or limited equipment to cook in, a tinned meat like this was a great alternative to larger cuts. It was affordable and came in a manageable size, especially for a single man or woman or for smaller families. And, you know, they did use the red ration points to purchase them, but I'm sure it was significantly cheaper than a whole ham. Next, we have a more M-O-R. Wilson's ad from the Ladies' Home Journal, November 1944. And I love this ad because it's very autumn festive. It's got autumn leaves in the background and shows a plate of the luncheon meat on some bread with 2 pickles, mashed potatoes with gravy, and green beans on the side. And it says, hot more sandwich for a junior commando's lunch. After the game, more rarebit on toast. So this is another recipe of like toasted bread with grilled like cheese that's been melted over the top, and as well as the more luncheon meat. The ad says, when there's a hint of winter in the air, then's the time to use your handy cans of Wilson's More in tempting hot dishes. Bake, fry, or broil it. There's more good taste in every bite. Different? Heaps of difference in its rare, distinctive flavor. More has that something extra, a master's touch. All solid, so good meat seasoned the Wilson way. Nutritious, too. Contains protein of highest quality and the important B vitamins of fresh pork. So here's the recipe for the more rare bit. Add a 1/4 teaspoon dry mustard, 1/2 cup grated cheese to 1/2 cup medium white sauce. Spread on 6 slices of toast. Top with more slices and broil. And then there's a S.P.A.M ad from the Minneapolis Star from November 12th. In the year of S.P.A.M's birth, 1937. It says, S.P.A.M stands for meat treat the year round. You'll agree with thousands. This easy-to-serve Hormel meat is grand for breakfast, lunch, supper. And the recipes, it has a few on here. Sliced S.P.A.M with tartar sauce, lettuce, mayonnaise, peanut butter, honey, grated raw carrots, and dozens of other tempting combinations. Oh dear. I don't know if today we would call any of those tempting, but I guess don't knock it till you try it. I don't know. So these are some examples of S.P.A.M on the home front. And, I was having a hard time finding specific experiences on the home front with S.P.A.M. I mean, they are out there, but it's almost like there's a lot, but then it's hard to narrow it down. And it's also, I don't know, it's just a lot. It's a lot of digging for something very specific. And so I'm sure there are like family stories of S.P.A.M recipes during the war. I'd love to hear about those. All right, so finally, what you've all been waiting for, the history of S.P.A.M from Hormel. So S.P.A.M was officially trademarked on May 11th, 1937, and it hit store shelves on July 5th, 1937. Hormel's president, J.C. Hormel, had the idea to use inexpensive, quote-unquote, nearly worthless pork shoulder meat and turn it into a spiced ham canned luncheon meat product. Jay sent for German canning expert Paul Jorn, I'm sure I didn't mispronounce that, to help with the technical work and contracted for $500,000 worth of advertising to push the ham. The unique success of S.P.A.M was due to a few things. One was the canning technology. If you think about it, how do you get meat compressed into a can with very little air? And that was the problem they were trying to solve. And so they were able to make the most meat with the least amount of space inside the can. And they had this thing that they were dealing with, the battle of loose juice. And I guess they had to kind of overcome like having too much aspic, or like the juices, the jellified juices from the ham, and to the meat ratio. So that was something that they figured out. Their product of, quote, flavor sealed canned whole ham was a success. But so this was before S.P.A.M, I guess. This was like a whole ham in a can. But 12 ounces of pork luncheon meat reacted differently. So they had first figured out this technology with ham, but breaking that down to a smaller 12-ounce loaf of pork luncheon meat was different. It did not react the same. So it says in the S.P.A.M, a biography book, the can, the solder, the seam, the fill, the mix, the cure, the age of the pig, the feet of the pig, the cast of the moon could cause too much precipitation of juice from the meat. So what the S.P.A.M scientists finally figured out was that the meat had to be mixed in a vacuum and deposited into the cans a particular way. When you open a can of S.P.A.M, out comes a block of meat with very little aspic to grease its exit. So that's kind of an engineering marvel, really. Like, it's pretty cool how they figured this out. The next thing that contributed to their success was advertising. Out of all the spiced luncheon meats out there, S.P.A.M did a lot. There are very large creative ads in magazines and newspapers. I've seen them in Life magazine, and I don't know if I've seen S.P.A.M in the women's magazines. I've seen Prem and More and Treat. but for some reason not S.P.A.M. So I don't know. Maybe they didn't focus on women's ads at the time. There were other magazines. But then again, maybe I haven't seen those particular issues where they do advertise. The name for S.P.A.M. came from Hormel's vice president's brother, an actor named Kenneth Dalgenu, for which he claimed a $100 prize. So what does the acronym of S.P.A.M. actually stand for? The name is derived from spiced ham. That's it. A Hormel company newsletter from the early 1940s said that the original S.P.A.M. recipe didn't contain any ham, just pork shoulder. So the recipe was changed to live up to its name. That is interesting. The recipe itself was developed by a French chef, Jean Vernet. S.P.A.M. had quite a few competitors, as I've already talked about. But today, I can really only find S.P.A.M. and Armour's Treat luncheon meat. So that's the can. I wrote it in my notes, but I forgot which one. I do have a tin of Treat luncheon meat downstairs. I have not tried yet. Now we're going to get to S.P.A.M. and the military. And while I don't typically focus on the military, I felt it was very important for this particular episode because S.P.A.M. and the military really go hand in hand. So GIs from World War II had their own names for S.P.A.M. That wasn't necessarily part of the acronym. One was ham that didn't pass its physical. Another was meatloaf without basic training. And finally, the real reason war was hell. Oh, dear. Despite soldiers' famous loathing of S.P.A.M., S.P.A.M. did well for itself during World War II. According to S.P.A.M. A Biography, between 1939 and 1942, net sales doubled to almost 120 million, and annual pork processing reached an all-time high of 1.6 million head, mostly because of Uncle Sam. So canned luncheon meat in general was a favorite of the armed forces, especially early in the war. Or maybe I should specify of the government who was purchasing food for the military. It was inexpensive, it was shelf-stable, and it was a filling protein source that traveled well. The Army alone received 150 million pounds of this stuff before war's end. So everyday soldiers were not having a choice in whether this was given to them. This was definitely the higher-ups. Camp cooks had to get really creative to use up all of that canned luncheon meat. Some just served it in those sliced planks. Others used a little more imagination. There were S.P.A.M. meatballs, S.P.A.M. a la mode, S.P.A.M. chop suey, which I have had, and it is quite tasty. Not the military recipe. I don't know what that is, but I have made chop suey with S.P.A.M. World War II Navy veteran Thomas D. Clancy reminisced, "You had it fried in the morning with chemical eggs. They burned it black as a painted door. They'd cut it up and put it into stews. They put it in sandwiches. They baked it with tomato sauce. They gave it to us on the beach. You got so you really hated it." And that's from the S.P.A.M. biography book. Now, to dispel a major myth, what the majority of soldiers ate during the war wasn't actually S.P.A.M. at all. It was a, quote, generic luncheon meat made from a government recipe and packed in 6-pound olive green government-issued tin fatigues by Hormel and 3 other meat packing companies. Unlike S.P.A.M., this luncheon meat contained no ham and was cooked and salted much more in order to withstand both the wartime cold of Ireland and the tropical heat of the Philippines, close quote. Also from the S.P.A.M. biography book. This really has fantastic info in it. All right, so that might come as a surprise. Maybe not, but I had always heard that S.P.A.M. was the meat sent to the military, and apparently not necessarily true. However, people were convinced this, like people meaning soldiers, were convinced it was S.P.A.M. because they'd had it before. And maybe for some other reasons, we'll find out. With the complaints pouring in, Hormel defended itself because soldiers were complaining they're getting too much of this meat. Hormel defended itself, saying that what they were eating in the field was a government recipe and not the superior S.P.A.M. so many people at home loved. This defense was published in a Yank magazine, but loads of GIs and military cooks wrote in protesting, swearing they'd been served Spam or had cooked it. The book says the argument ended when Yank magazine published a photograph of a grinning GI popping out from behind a 6-foot-tall barricade of real Spam cans and shipping boxes. So Hormel, of course, was like, oh no, going back through their invoices, discovered that the Army had indeed purchased a large order of Spam in September of 1942 to fill a gap needed for meat. Not only that, but a huge amount of the real deal was being sent to allies to aid in the Lend-Lease program. Some of that supply could have ended up back in United States military rations. So it was a myth, and yet at the same time, not for everyone. Spam was sent to soldiers to fill in that meat gap, and they were just sick of it. And I think Hormel was frustrated by this because they believed they made a really superior product, and then the government recipe, which they were helping to can, it wasn't their recipe. And it was, like it said, more highly salted, but they were equating their product with this government stuff, saying it's the same. And so, I mean, if you can imagine their feelings about this, it would be like, no, this is, we make the good stuff. What you're getting is not the same. But anyway, very interesting little twist in the story there. Now, with this military experience with Spam, there is an interesting connection to the home front. And as I mentioned before, homemakers were using Spam quite a bit. And I mean, there was lots and lots of suggestions in the newspapers about how to use economical meats like Spam. In this article in the Honolulu Star Bulletin from May of 1943, it says, with meat so expensive, many women have been forced to cut down on the amount they serve during the week. And for some families, it has come as a surprise that dinners can be just as satisfying and just as delicious without the good old American habit of chops and steaks. It has taken a war to get some households acquainted with the possibilities of cheese dishes or dried beans. Here are 2 recipes which my friend, Mrs. Lind, thinks are worthwhile suggesting for dinner. And then she has these recipes for cheese and Spam fondue. This involves mashing Spam with a fork. And then she has a few other suggestions like scalloped potatoes with Spam and things like that. So the newspapers are chock full of these suggestions for women that would like to know how to use Spam more effectively. Well, as you might put together, women finding Spam a great addition to their menus also realize, hey, this is an easy way to send some extra food to my son, my husband, my brother, in the service, and they send it overseas, little knowing what trauma is being inflicted on them with too much luncheon meat from the government. So there's this other article from the Hawaii Tribune Herald from January 1945. It says, that package which Private First Class Rudy Speedball Hakel received the other day had everyone worried to death. It was a metal container about 3 inches wide, 4 inches deep, and about 10 inches long. Offhand, that doesn't sound as if it is anything to make a fuss about, but did you ever see the cans which Spam comes in? Well, if you did, you would know what we mean. Rudy was worried too, until he opened it and found that his folks had taken the Spam out of the can and filled it with candy, nuts, and gum. This should serve as a warning to all who send parcels to servicemen to be very careful what kind of a container they use. Spam cans, even without Spam, are demoralizing. Oh, dear. Wow. I came across another story involving a soldier and civilians with Spam. This comes from the Washington Missourian, November 1944. A soldier related a rather interesting story to me the other day concerning Spam, that delicious canned meat. In parentheses, it says, this isn't a means of advertising. Please bear that in mind. Anyway, this soldier was stationed in the South Pacific for many long months, where at times Spam was served morning, noon, and night, he said. He may have exaggerated that point a little, but it brought out the fact that GIs were tired of eating it. Well, the time came for a furlough, and the soldier was invited to a round of parties and good times. At one of these parties, in his honor, the hostess handed him a sandwich. How did you guess? It was Spam. Now, the soldier has one consoling thought. Civilians eat it too. And when the holidays rolled around, if folks were thinking of sending their soldier something in the mail for Christmas, maybe Spam was a good idea. But in this article from the Commercial Appeal from Tennessee, July 1945, the headline says, Home folks told soldiers wants. Spam is not one of them. Practical gifts named. It says, Spam is often found in Army menus, along with dehydrated potatoes, onions, cabbage, etc. There is nothing that will lower the morale more than a package from home containing Spam. To the GI who receives it, it seems to him like somebody has played a cruel joke on him, and yet the person who sent it had the best intentions. Sometimes you hear remarks such as, I thought the Army had bought up all the Spam, or it's like throwing a bucket of water into a drowning man's face. Or, this is Tojo's secret weapon via the home front. Wow. They had a lot of strong feelings about this Spam. And so, after getting weary of hearing all these complaints, this person decided to take a local poll to see what soldiers really wanted for Christmas or for gifts. That was so nice of him. It was Private First Class John A. Roy, care of the postmaster in New York. So that was very thoughtful of him. I'm sure other soldiers appreciated this effort on his part. So what about after the war? Imagine soldiers coming home, their families happily serving meals and sitting down together as a family, and what would be on the table? Sometimes it would be Spam, that old enemy staring him in the eye. And you can imagine the dismay. In fact, I have this magazine. The cover is a treasure. I'll have the picture of this up on my Substack. It's the Foreign Service magazine. This issue is from November 1947, and it shows a husband sitting down at the table. It looks like it's a Thanksgiving holiday table. And there, wrapped with ribbon, is a big can of Spam by his plate. And he has this look of shock and dismay on his face. And his wife is behind him kind of chuckling. It's obviously a joke. And then his or her mother is just coming through the doorway of the kitchen carrying the actual dinner of the roast turkey. So playing a cruel joke indeed. Oh, goodness. So that's pretty funny. This article from the Altus Times Democrat in Oklahoma, November of 1946, hints at some healing surrounding Spam. It says, there has been a lot of talk about the rehabilitation of veterans. We wish to hail the rehabilitation of Spam and fellow travelers under whatever trade name. How many war-weary, Spam-surfeited soldiers scattered over the face of the globe found it easier in their hearts to forgive their erring enemies than the makers of Spam? How many solicitous mothers slipped cans of Spam into Christmas parcels, going overseas to Junior, only to learn in due time that never, never, never must they let another can of that stuff so much as cross Junior's path. Of course, all this was grossly unfair to the intrinsic merits of Spam. Ice cream with fudge sauce would have met the same response if dished up morning, noon, and night, week in and week out, we suppose. At any rate, Spam is now justified of her customers. Even a veteran's eye lights up these days at a tasty, toasty slice of Spam snuggled beside his morning egg. So soon are old enemies forgotten, old virtues rediscovered. So justly are we schooled by scarcity to appreciate the good already at hand. Aw. Well, I think they do have a good point. I think if anyone is served the same food every single day, every single meal, they're definitely going to be sick of it. And I think when it comes to something like Spam, that's already kind of salty. If it's even more salted, it's just such a strong flavor. It's easy to get sick of very strong flavors as opposed to more mild ones. So their loathing is, I think, justified, but unfortunately, Spam got the short end of the deal on that. Now, I wanted to talk about Spam abroad because one of the most interesting aspects of Spam is the impact it had on other cultures around the globe. As Spam was sent abroad, like the book says, for Lend-Lease, and as soldiers used their unwanted tins of Spam as trading currency. Spam and how it's been incorporated into cultures around the world is fascinating and complex. Sadly, I don't have the time to research the topic to give it the credit it deserves. So I'm just going to briefly highlight a few examples I found. I will be including some links, all the links that I found in my Substack post for this episode, if you're interested in learning more. In England, I believe this is also from the S.P.A.M book. Yes. They relate a story. John Dunmore got his first taste of Spam as part of Red Cross food relief packages delivered to the German-occupied Channel Islands only months before food stocks were scheduled to run out. It was a luxury, he recalls. People washed out the tin carefully after use because the water one rinsed it out with made soup, thin but precious. Another story in the book relates Irena Erdang de Tour calls the care packages of Spam, chocolate, and soup she received in the ruins of Warsaw after years of slave labor in Berlin, ambrosia. Oh, I guess I'm sorry, my mistake, in Warsaw, Poland. They were the answer to an SOS, like Robinson Crusoe, a blood transfusion, salvation. I could go on forever. And finally, there is a story from the Russian front. In this article from the Vancouver Sun, dated May 13th, 1944, it's entitled Spam Opened the Second Front by Jill Massingham. And she says, meat supply of the Red Army is almost exclusively chopped ham from the United States. The Russian soldier calls it, quote unquote, second front. And every time he digs an opener into a tin, he exclaims, I am now opening the second front. He says it in an amused tone of voice. Yet how long could the Red Army have held the Germans without American and Empire food supplies? SPAM, and what it stands for, was truly a second front, which saved Russia from disintegration through lack of food. Before the German invasion, Soviet Russia was the world's greatest producer of cereals. She was fifth in the world scale as a butter producer and third in the production of meat. Much of these essential foodstuffs came from the Ukraine, where alone 60 million acres were under grain, mostly wheat and rye. Not for nothing is this most fertile, most densely populated, and richest republic of the USSR called the breadbasket of Russia. And the article goes on to talk about the challenges that the Soviet Union had in procuring food for their people. And this was a big problem for many people during the war. And finally, at the end of the article, it says, the Red Army is retaking a countryside where villages have been burnt out and from where the population has vanished with the Germans. 20 million tons of cereals, 14 million head of hogs and cattle have gone from the Ukraine as well. Until this devastation can be repaired, there will be Spam on the Russian soldiers' menu, a second front, which was opened by the United Nations and one which was a decisive factor in the turn of the tide. And I think this was a really interesting story because we don't really... at least not on my podcast, we don't really talk a lot about the Soviet Union and that side of the war. And so, they were our allies during World War II. And so it was interesting to see how they were using Spam to just feed. And I think this article also highlights the devastation that was happening in Europe and Asia because of the war. And that just made things a lot more desperate for feeding not just their militaries, but also their people. A lot of the farmland was being destroyed, and that created a lot of challenges. So projects or cooperation like Lend-Lease was a really helpful asset for our allies during the war. So for people who received Spam, who were in much more reduced circumstances due to the effect the war had on their country, I mean, this Spam was a huge blessing for them. So while soldiers were really sick of it, which valid, if you have it morning, noon, and night for days on end, I mean, I think anyone would get sick of it. But for these people where meat probably was really scarce, this was a huge blessing to them. And finally, I wanted to talk about S.P.A.M musubi. And this comes from Hawaii, but it's based on a Japanese dish. Some people have claimed that S.P.A.M musubi was created during World War II or had World War II roots. But for my research, this was a creation by a Japanese American and Hawaiian resident, Barbara Funamura, and it was invented much later, decades later. But it's hard to pinpoint an exact date. If you haven't had or seen S.P.A.M musubi, it is a flattened cake of cooked rice, and then it's got a slab of, I think it's grilled cooked Spam on top, and then wrapped in nori, which is a dried edible seaweed used in Japanese cuisine. And it looks delicious. I have not had it, unfortunately. And it comes kind of in that brick shape. But originally, what Barbara said was that she created it in a triangle shape, and it just exploded in popularity. And then, there's a whole story behind this. I will also include the link. But eventually, it kind of morphed into the cube shape, which, is more convenient because that's the shape of Spam. So it's very delicious. But from what I found, not based in World War II specifically. However, I was looking in a new to me cookbook that I acquired recently. It's called Hawaiian and Pacific Foods, and this edition is from 1945. And I was very excited to get this because I really wanted to explore more wartime era Asian recipes. And in this cookbook, there is a recipe for musubi. And this version of musubi is not like S.P.A.M musubi. This is kind of the iteration before S.P.A.M musubi came along. It's a Japanese recipe for taking cooked rice that's still hot, and then you mold it with moistened hands. And you mold the rice into balls that are 3 inches in diameter. And then the balls may be rolled in toasted black sesame seeds or shredded nori. And then the rice balls are used for lunches or picnics. So this sounds really delicious. I would love to try this version of musubi, and then also S.P.A.M musubi. I just thought that was cool that they've included the recipe in this particular cookbook. I will have a picture of that on my Substack. Now, what's the deal with S.P.A.M today? S.P.A.M is sold online and in grocery stores worldwide. I don't know about your grocery store. My grocery store does carry S.P.A.M. Not a lot of flavors, but some flavors. And I've seen it all over the place. BritishCornerShop.co.uk has an interesting description of S.P.A.M on their site, because they do sell S.P.A.M on their website. It says S.P.A.M has been a favorite of the British since the 1940s and is great for sandwiches, fritters, and salads. S.P.A.M is sold in 41 countries and is very popular in a variety of cultures and is perfect served hot or cold. Many people have grown up eating S.P.A.M and continue to eat it on a regular basis with chips and gravy. Most popular with customers in France, Italy, Spain, Germany, Canada, Greece, Portugal, Sweden, and Switzerland, but you can buy S.P.A.M for delivery worldwide. And I would add the United States, but I wonder if the United States is not in this list because we just go to the grocery store and buy it normally. Maybe that's the case. And then according to Hormel's website, regular S.P.A.M or S.P.A.M Classic is still their top selling flavor. I was very curious about this because I was looking up all the different flavors of S.P.A.M, and S.P.A.M Classic still number one. If you followed me on Instagram for some time, you might have seen a specific Christmas post that I did. It was a reel of this new flavor of Spam that came out a few years ago. It was figgy pudding flavored Spam. That stuff was interesting. It tasted kind of like your grandmother's potpourri, but in Spam form. The smell was more overwhelming than the flavor. The flavor was actually not too bad. It's an experience. In closing, I just wanted to say that I think Spam holds the rare distinction of being one of the few branded foods that connects cultures across the world. So many people have taken this creative tinned luncheon meat and made it their own by incorporating it into their country's cuisine. I personally didn't grow up eating Spam, but I've enjoyed learning to cook with it as an adult. It's been a fun adventure. So if you haven't tried Spam yet, I encourage you to give it a try. The texture might take some getting used to, but the flavor is really nice when mixed with other things. So I don't know, give it a try and see what you think. Spam has created this cult following, and who knows, you might be the next convert to Spam. Today's cookbook feature is a little bit different because it's also combined with the Homefront highlight. So this cookbook that I chose for my collection is called the Hilo Women's Club Cookbook Hawaiian Recipes from 1943. Now, the reason why I've combined it with the Homefront highlight is because my cookbook has an inscription inside of the owner of this cookbook. His name was Orville R. Ossian. I have 2 cookbooks in my collection that I know belong to men, and I really find these special. And so I did a little research on Orville, and I thought I'd share what I found with you. And then I thought we would learn a little bit more about the Hilo Women's Club. So Orville Rutherford Ossian was from Illinois. He was a college student at Iowa State College in Ames, Iowa, when he filled out his draft card in July of 1941. He had brown hair, blue eyes, was 5'10", and had a ruddy complexion. He enlisted June 14th, 1945, into the Army and was discharged February 6, 1946. According to an Illinois newspaper, he spent 3 years in the U.S. District Engineering Office in Honolulu. And I found his name on a few passenger ship manifests. I'm not sure where Honolulu fits in with his brief Army service, but his brother Lyle also served in the Army Air Force in a B-29 bomber. I was able to find this information on Ancestry.com, and I just thought it was really cool. I even found like a high school photo of him. But anyway, I thought this was really special to know a little bit more about Orville and to be able to connect with him a little bit, and knowing that this was his cookbook. I'm curious about which recipes he tried or found interesting. The first printing was in July of 1937, which I think is somewhere close to when this organization started. And the second printing was in March 1943. Now, Hilo is a town on the island of Hawaii. In the foreword, it says, Hilo is noted for its hospitality and excellent food, and in this book are presented recipes which have been used by Hilo hostesses and enjoyed by their guests. It is not our idea to add just another cookbook to the many good ones already available. We feel that with our various island products and ways of using them, and the unusual and interesting additions to our menus which have been brought from other lands, we have something different to offer. We thank all who have contributed recipes and wish to express our appreciation for the cooperation and generosity of all who have helped to make this book possible. And so this cookbook is unique because, well, one, it's an organization cookbook, this women's organization, which I will learn about in just a second. The way it's bound is also very interesting. It has 2 holes in all the pages, and then it's wrapped. It's bound with this plant fiber twine. I'm not quite sure exactly what it's made from, but that's the binding and that's it. So it does make it kind of challenging to open the book without popping some pages out, but it's unique from the other cookbooks in my collection. And then in the cookbook, there's recipes. A lot of them are attributed to women. I'm guessing, I think it was women in their organization contributed these recipes. So a lot of different types of things, especially using island fruits and fish. Although I was reading that some of the fish was difficult to come by, but you could substitute other fish that was available. And then they have sections on, there's Hawaiian food. Then they have a whole section of all these different fruits. There's Japanese dishes and Chinese dishes. And then, all kind of miscellaneous things. Beverages, breads and rolls, preserves. There was not a recipe for musubi in here, I looked. But it's got just a really nice variety. And all the recipes have been tested by the women who contributed them. Now, I did not have a chance to make any recipes, sadly, for this episode because it's very hard finding the time. But I did want to mention there is a recipe in here for chop suey, donated by Mrs. George Richardson. And this is similar to other chop suey recipes I've tried. And it is very easy to swap out whatever meat that they recommend with S.P.A.M. So this particular recipe, they're all kind of different, but this one calls for 2 cups chopped onions, 2 cups chopped celery, 2 pounds pork or chicken diced, 2 cups, so you could do 2 pounds of S.P.A.M, I guess, 2 cups water, half cup canned bamboo shoots, half cup canned or fresh mushrooms, 6 tablespoons shoyu, which is soy sauce, peanut oil, and then a package of long rice. You just mix all the things together and add the seasoning and serve it with rice. That's pretty much it. You do fry the vegetables in the peanut oil, and then you add the meat and cook it until it's tender. So, kind of basic stuff, but very good. This sounds like a yummy recipe. The recipe I tried called for bean sprouts, and sometimes they call for water chestnuts. So it just depends. But I like that they've got this recipe in here, and you can always sub in S.P.A.M. Okay, so a little bit of history about the Hilo Women's Club. And I actually just looked at the newspaper date. I didn't realize at first that this was from 1925. And then in this article, it says that they're only like 5 years old, the organization. So I'm guessing it started about 1920. It says the Hilo Women's Club is composed of 3 major committees or divisions: the Civic Committee, the Outdoor Improvement Committee, and the Arts Committee. The work of these committees is taken up consecutively at the monthly meetings, each meeting being in charge of a major committee. Besides the 3 major committees, the Hilo Women's Club has various subcommittees. There is one for the better enforcement of the 18th Amendment. There is the Welfare Committee, whose duty it is to send flowers to our sick members and to send flowers regularly to the Hilo Hospital twice a week. And the committee which goes to Pumali, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I know I did. Home to cheer the inmates with fruit or goodies or entertainment. The club also furnishes a small amount of money each month, which is enough to give an outing to the children inmates who are well enough to have the tedium of hospital life relieved with a sight of the outer world. There is the Humane Committee, doing the work of the defunct Humane Society of Hilo. There are a playground committee and a committee for visiting and advisory to the Hilo Hospital, a detention home committee, and a committee of the League of Women Voters. A motion picture committee was the last standing committee established in the last year. The Hilo Women's Club stands in readiness to serve the community of Hilo, and calls do come from members, the Chamber of Commerce, from citizens, and from teachers asking assistance in matters of public safety, school needs, child welfare, revision of traffic laws, petitions for cleanup conditions, and requests from the press, and various other petitions. So this group seemed to do a lot of things, including publishing a cookbook. So I guess they'd been established for quite some time before they published their first edition in 1937. But anyway, I just thought that was really interesting to look at one of these women's organizations. There were many, many during the early 20th century trying to do service in their communities. I think that's really cool to have their cookbook from contributions from their members. Well, that's it for this episode. I just want to thank you for your patience as I navigate grad school and the podcast and Substack and just family life. So I do appreciate your support. And if you'd like to join me, I'm on Substack more than Instagram these days. So my Substack is victorykitchenpodcast.substack.com, where I post recipes, as always, and all kinds of other little tidbits. And if you'd like to see any of the images and research that I collected for this episode, head on over to Substack. That's where I post it all. So anyway, thanks again for joining me, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.